Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski, and this is the podcast where we take a look at the impact that the built environment has on our health, our wellness, our productivity, and our general joy of being alive. And of course, we always talk about sustainable design as well. Today, I have a very exciting guest. I have Jan Denneman representing the Good Light Group. Jan, welcome to the show. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, Joe, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for this. I always start by giving the guests an opportunity to introduce themselves and have our listeners get to know them a little bit better. So I understand you are a physicist by training. Tell us why you chose that path, and then tell us about how that pathway led you ultimately to the Good Light Group.
Yeah, I'm a physicist because my teacher in high school, was a brilliant physics teacher. So I said, that's also the job I wanted to do. I wanted to become a teacher in high school later on in physics. But I studied physics, and I think physics is such an interesting topic. So after my studies, I didn't want to become a teacher, but I joined a company, Philips, and I was able to work in research of lamps and lighting more than 45 years ago. And I've worked my whole working life in the lighting area because, especially in the old days when you had gas discharge lamps and so on, there was a lot of physics going on in those products. So that was my background, And then I joined Philips first in the technical area, but later I ended up also in marketing and sales and business development and leadership. I became executive and so on. So I have a long career in the lighting world.
Fantastic. And how did you end up with the Good Light Group? How did that come to be?
Yeah, the reason is that around the year 2000, 2002, 2004, so much new things have been discovered about the effects of light on human health and behavior that in my last part of my career in Philips lighting, I tried to make that a real business, a marketing line, and I was not successful. And the reason is that lighting, especially electric lighting, is looked at more as an energy saving opportunity than something that has to do with health or well-being of people,
right,
or with sleep. And the reason is it's such an unknown territory for people that together with a couple of scientists, we said, let's create a non-profit organization, the Good Light Group, that has the main task to promote to the general public what the effects of light on public health are.
Okay, so let's dive right into that.
Yeah.
What do you actually do in order to promote health related to light? How are you getting the message out there? What are the specific and tactical things that you guys do in order to fulfill that important mandate?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, as I said, there are quite a few scientists today that know very well what the enormous effect of light on human well-being, human sleep quality is. But the general public doesn't know that. So what we do is we created a website where you can find a lot of information, www.goodlightgroup.org. We have animated videos there. We created what we call a Good Light Guide, which is written so that lay people also can understand what light does. We give presentations, lectures, we organize webinars, we do podcasts when we are invited, like in this podcast. So whatever opportunity we get to spread the message, we take that opportunity.
Well, let's take advantage of this opportunity. How important is natural light?
It's
and
crucial.
Why is it important?
So humans are made for light. We humans are made for daylight. Not only humans, all living species on Earth, are made for light. And humans are already for a couple of thousand years the only living species that deliberately shield themselves from daylight. And that gives a problem. And that results, for example, in sleeping problems, in mood problems during the day, in having easier burnouts and that kind of things. Yeah. And the background is, and it was discovered in the year not so long ago, year 2002, that the human eye has special cells in the retina of the eye that are not meant for the vision. Yeah. You have rods and cones in the retina that are linked to the vision center of the brain. But those new discovered cells, and I always call them spheres, they have a scientific name, intrinsic photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. Yeah, but that's far too difficult. And so people learned in biology class often about rods and cones that are helping the vision. But there are also spheres, and they are covered with our internal clock, the master clock in the brain. And that master clock in the brain makes sure that our body functions stay in tune with the 24-hour rhythm. Because if we like it or not, we have to live on a planet that turns around its axis in exactly 24 hours. And we need to stay in that rhythm. For example, to sleep well. If you go to bed at 11 in the evening, for example, your body must be ready for sleep. And for most people, that's not the case. So your watch can be at 11 o'clock, but your body can have a completely different time. Because that central clock in your brain can't read the clock. It only reacts on the total amount of light and darkness it has seen during the day. So tuning the clock can only be done with light. And that's the importance of light. And daylight is the best because we are made for daylight. So if you have an outdoor job, you are blessed because people with an outdoor job, usually their internal clock runs in sync with the time of day. But since more than 90% of the people do have indoor jobs, they are shielded from daylight. And indoors, usually the light level is far too low to trigger those spheres in the retina that sets the clock. So that's the problem.
So there's two issues as I understand it. One is the absolute level of brightness, right? So the quantity of light that's available. But what about the spectrum of light, right? And we know there's issues between natural light versus some of the artificial light that's available today. Can you speak to that aspect of it?
Yeah, sure. So daylight has a big influence on those spheres in the retina and on the internal clock, the master clock of your body. And daylight has a lot of blue, especially in the morning. So more the blue side of the spectrum, is more effective for setting the clock than, for example, red light. Red light has hardly any influence. So it's the blue side of the spectrum. But from the other hand, so daylight is always good because we are made for daylight. But if you work with artificial light, you should have more blue light. But since all electric light today is made by LEDs, and an LED at least has 50% blue content, whatever color that LED has. And the official scientific name of blue content is melanopic content. You need to be more on the melanopic side of the spectrum. That's the blue side of the spectrum, because in those light-sensitive cells, there sits melanopsin, and that's the light-sensitive element in those cells. And they have a spectral sensitivity which peaks more in the blue. So the spectrum is important, but more important is the light level. Because basically, if you are in blue light, but the light level is too low, the brain still sees that as biological darkness.
So what level do we need to be at, Jan, in order for it to be seen as actual?
Yeah, there is a very good report about that, because that was the question that I always ask to scientists in this field. And this is the field that is done by people that study brain neurophysiology, chronobiology. And I always ask them, how much light should there be? And if you ask that to a scientist, the first answer is, yeah, that depends.
Of course.
Yeah. And the second answer is we need more investigations because, that's their business model. Yeah. But after a while, we challenged them as the Good Light Group, and we were also instrumental to get 18 scientists together. And I always call them the Manchester Group, because that was under leadership of Professor Brown of the Manchester University. And he assembled 17 others, different scientists with different backgrounds from different universities. So it's not a one school vision. No, it's a very wide group of scientists. And they came up with recommendations. And that was finally published in the year 2022. So only 3 years ago in PLOS Biology magazine. And they came to the conclusion that humans need to be at least in 500 to 1,000 lux the whole day in their eyes. Of course, they are scientists, they don't talk about luxes, because lux is a thing that you measure with such a lux meter. Yeah.
Right.
In America, they use foot candles. Yeah. And the difference between lux and foot candles is about a factor 10. And so you need to be around 50 to 100 foot candles on eye level. I now measure in foot candles. Yeah?
Right.
And this is daylight because I'm sitting here for a window. And what that does is if you have that the whole day, it tells your body that's daytime, and it synchronizes your biological clock. And also important, in the evening, you need to be at much lower levels, a factor 10 lower. So below 10 lux or below 1 foot candle.
That's for sleeping?
That's in the evening.
Okay.
A couple of 3 hours before sleep. And in the evening and at night, it should be even lower. Yeah.
Wow. 10 lux is very low. That's a...
Yeah, it's not so low. If it's full moon, you outdoors, it's around half a lux.
Okay.
0.5 lux. And you simply can walk on the street then. Yeah. So your eyes are that sensitive, but that means the rods and the cones, not the spheres. The spheres require much higher light levels. So that's what they say. And in practice, people indoor, is an indoor job, in a well-lit office, and well-lit then means well-lit for visual functions. They are in light levels that are a factor 5 to 10 too low. Only though the people that are very close to a window, within 1 meter from a window, and especially if you're facing the window, you might get enough light when you're indoors. But people that working in cubicles or 2 or 3 meters away from windows, they almost certain don't get enough light during daytime. And what does that mean? There are, on average person, when they don't get the right light diet, I always call it light diet, if you have enough light during daytime and darkness in the evening, your clock starts running behind your master clock with around 20 minutes per day.
Wow.
So after a week, your clock runs behind, say, 2 hours, roughly. So if you have a daytime job and you work from Monday to Friday, on Friday evening, your internal clock runs 2 hours behind the real time. That means if you go to bed at 11 o'clock, your hormone levels in your blood are not right. For example, your cortisol hormone is much too high and your melatonin hormone is much too low. That means that your stress level, hormone is stress, activity is high, and the melatonin hormone is low. And for a good sleep, it needs to be in that way. Because if the melatonin is much higher than the cortisol, then you go through the required 4, 5, 6 sleep waves with all their levels, and then you really recover from sleep. And people that where the clock is wrong, so melatonin is too low when they go to bed, they miss basically the first 2, 3 sleep waves. They are unconscious, because that's what people often tell to me, Jan, that's not, that can't be true, because if I go to bed, I'm so tired, I immediately sleep. But there's a difference between getting unconscious and sleeping well. So people basically they get unconscious, but in the first couple of hours of their sleeping night, they don't recover. So the brains don't recover. And they usually notice because when they wake up, they need an alarm clock and they feel tired. And that's the biggest sign of an internal clock that's not running in time, in sync with the real time.
Do you want to bring lots of healthy, beautiful, natural light in your building and still meet energy codes? Try Solera from Advanced Glazings. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Right. Yeah, I had Dr. Russell Foster on the show quite some time ago, and he really went deep on that. As a matter of fact, I think at one point he said that the WHO was looking at shift work and considering shift work a carcinogen, because of how profoundly it impacts us to not be in sync with that that 24-hour clock. I was astounded, and I'm hearing it again today. It really is extraordinary. And I don't know that I don't think anybody outside of this very tight little world really gets that message yet. I have 2 follow-up questions.
Sure.
There's 2 things that, based on other things that I've heard, Jan. First of all, let's talk about the red part of the spectrum. I've interviewed Dr. Martin Moore-Eady. I've interviewed Dr. Glenn Jeffrey and Scott Zimmerman, other people who've done some research in this world. And they're saying that, the long wavelength reds and the near IR, they perform different functions outside of the sleep side of it, but they perform really important functions for our health. Like they're even connecting diabetes and heart disease to an absence of red. What do you know about that part of it?
Yeah, so we Homo sapiens, what we are, we developed at a certain moment relatively unnatural. We shielded ourselves from nature, from daylight. So first of all, and the internal environments we are in are too dark, which has that influence on the clock. But also we miss the red and near infrared parts of the spectrum. And near infrared, especially, I've read many studies that has a very beneficial effect on life quality, on health as well. For example, the photobiological effects of light. What happens is that infrared penetrates into the skin, into the mitochondrion. Those are the energy centers of every cell we have. And if you get enough infrared, that has a positive systemic impact on our health quality. Definitely. So we miss that also if we are indoors.
Right.
And there are also companies I know that are experimenting with adding to electric lights also infrared emitting diodes, LEDs that compensate for that. That's important. And also what we miss indoors is ultraviolet from the sun. It's on the far blue part of the spectrum, which also has a big influence on creating vitamin D. On a natural way, our skin can produce vitamin D, and that's important for the quality of our bones and so on, and other functions. And also we are missing that. Of course, when you're outside in the sun, you get that UVB especially. You should not get too much because then you get sunburns. So that's also not good. So always protect yourself when you're indoors. So put a cap up or whatever and use sunscreens to block too much UV. But we should actually get a little bit UV radiation as well. So we miss a lot when we are indoors. So healthy buildings, should, in my view, have much more attention also for the light quality. than they have now. They spend a lot of focus on air quality, but light quality is also an important thing. Because most people think that if the light is okay to see, the light is okay. But that's not true.
Right. Well, okay, so that leads into my other follow-up question, which is, I've yet to have this question answered in any sort of satisfactory way. So hopefully this will be the day. The ratio or the split between natural light and artificial light in a building. So, it's very common, more common than not, to have a situation where, like a hybrid lighting situation, where you have natural light coming in and also some portion of the space needs supplemental lighting because you just, sometimes it's difficult. The geometry of the interior makes it difficult for the natural light to penetrate. How much is enough? Like, let's say we've got 1,000 lux in a particular part of the building. 500 lux is coming from the window. 500 lux is coming from an LED overhead. Is there, it needs to be 200, it needs to be 300 from the window in order for us to get the health benefits associated with that? Is there any research to speak to that?
Yeah, unfortunately, research is still very thin, but the report of the Manchester group, you can find the link to that article on our website, talks about, say, 500 lux. You should get the whole day at least 500 lux in your eyes. And
of full spectrum light?
Yeah, the problem is they talk about melanopic light and melanopic luxes, and you need a very expensive photospectrometer to measure that. So if you have it from the philosophy, daylight is always 100% melanopic.
Okay.
And so daylight counts more. Yeah. But if you put glazing, if you put windows between daylight and ourselves, that could shield a little bit. And LEDs have at least 50% melanopic. So that's the way I come up with a minimum of 500. Okay. But those minimums are always established for test persons. Yeah. Yeah. And in those university studies, the test persons are always students. So they are 20 years old.
Right.
25. Older eyes, your eyes, probably, they need already twice as much light. My eyes, I'm again 20 years older, needs 3 to 4 times more light. And since people need to work until older ages, you need to have at least, say, 1,000 to 2,000 lux in this way getting into your eyes the whole day. That's what they say. And that's because they did all kind of measurements on what they call circadian phase shift reduction, alertness, and that kind of thing, sleep delays, and so on. And they said if people have the whole day at least 1,000 lux in their eyes, they are okay. And in the evening, they should get below 10, and at night below 1 lux.
Right.
Yeah, and the situation is, if you are outdoors, you're always getting this in your eyes. At least 4,000, 5,000 lux. If it's a little bit sunny, 20,000 lux. In midsummer, 100,000 lux. So whenever you're outdoors, even on a very clouded, rainy day, you get thousands of lux in your eyes. So this is, outdoors is never a problem. But indoors, it's always a problem and a challenge to get to these levels.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Over the years, I've done a lot of work with advanced glazings, and I think about, they do a lot of gymnasiums and sports facilities, and it's very common to have 2,000 lux, 3,000 lux in these sports facilities. Same with like transition spaces like atriums and hallways. You'll see thousands of lux there, but then you get to the office and everybody's okay with 300 or maybe 500. It's really bizarre. Yeah. Would you expect you'd want more in the offices, in the classrooms, in the places where the actual work is getting done?
Yeah, absolutely. Now you need much more. Yeah, you need to have the 1,000 lux in your head. And watch out, you need to measure in this way, because light is usually measured horizontally. Because the luminaire is hanging here, the lamps, and then it's relatively easy to get a couple of hundred lux on this level in this way. But the lux needs to enter your eyes.
Right.
So light that is coming from above needs to be reflected and enter your eyes in this way. So this is the way you should measure lux for your health.
Tired of ugly blinds blocking your view? Imagine solving glare and heat gain without fighting the blinds and without replacing your glass. Glare Repair by Solera is here. Learn more at advancedglazings.com/glare repair.
Absolutely. Okay, that's brilliant. You've got a video on your website called Twilight Indoors, and I
Yeah.
think you kind of spoke to it already, but what's that video about? What is Twilight
That's
Indoors?
we have a couple of, on our homepage, you find a couple of animated videos which
Yes.
try to tell this whole story, where I use probably too many words to explain it, in a couple of minutes.
Oh, it's like a 1 minute, 20-second video or something. It's fantastic.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and every one is about the twilight. So the moment of sunrise in the morning, I've measured it a lot. You see at that moment, not even looking at the sun, but looking the other side, it's already 500 lux.
Wow. Okay.
And then during the whole day, you get to thousands of lux, and then at sunset, at that moment, outdoors, it's again 500 lux. So 500 lux is a magic figure, I think, given by the Earth. Rotation around this axis and the sun and so on. Indoors, we always live in levels, couple of perhaps 100, 150 lux. So that's in the twilight zone, the twilight time. That's between when sun has set, the next half hour, it's roughly that light level that is in our offices. That's the twilight level. And your brain sees the whole day that you are in twilight. So it hasn't seen the sun coming up. And that's the reason that it starts delaying the clock, your internal clock.
Okay.
Your body clock. And for example, in areas like here where we have daylight, what we call daylight saving time.
Yes, we do too.
In Europe, in the evenings, it's light. The sun is up until 10 o'clock at night. So what people do, they are sitting the whole day in twilight. So their brain is urgently looking for light information to set the clock. At 6 o'clock, they're home, they have dinner, and at 6:30, they're sitting in the yard, or going to play tennis outside, or playing whatever they do, go out for a walk in daylight. So your brain thinks it's early morning, because that's the first level of light they see at the wrong time. So if that's the situation, the clock is not shifted with 20 minutes up front, but could be much more, half an hour up front, because you give signals to your brain. It's morning because that's the first real light your eyes see. So that's the biggest disadvantage of daylight saving times. We should get immediately rid of that. That's sick making. And what all that time shifting, but some people call it, the consequence of that is that you get into a circadian disruption, or you get circadian symptoms that are, the first of all is your sleep quality is not good enough. And you can check that with yourself. If you wake up in the morning, are you waking up at a fixed moment, roughly? Or do you need a wake-up call, an alarm clock? If you need an alarm clock to wake up, that's a sign that your circadian system or your day-night rhythm is not in tune with the time of day. The second alarm is when you are up in the morning. Do you feel well rested, or do you feel tired? Feel tired? Can be a sign of the circadian syndrome. If you are not feeling happy, if you get mood swings easily or so on, that also is a sign, can be a sign of the circadian syndrome. And last but not least, if you don't have enough energy or not creative, what you used to be, Those are all signs of what we call circadian syndrome, and it can be also signs of other diseases. And if always ask your general practices, general doctor, for advice. But it could be a sign that your biological rhythm is not in tune with the time of day.
Right.
And as said, your central clock can't read this. And this is only understood by a cognitive part of your brain. And it has nothing to do with the 24-hour rhythm.
Right.
Another important thing is that I talk about circadian rhythm, circadian system, circadian syndromes.
Yeah.
The circadian means around a day, roughly. That's circa is around, dia is day, circadian. Yes. First life on Earth, roughly, 300 million years ago, when the first cells started showing signs of life, they had to deal with the fact that part of the day it was light and part of the day it was dark in exactly 24 hours. So the first fundamental process of life is the circadian process. That's a fundamental life process, not only 300 million years ago, but still today. For all living species, also for the Homo sapiens, also for humans, for us. And the circadian system, especially in our type of species, is tuned by light.
Right.
The only way to do that. And so light is a fundamental thing. And the light outdoors is always good for our circadian system. But the light indoors is in 99% of the cases not good enough. Simply should have much more light during daytime, much less light in the evening.
Right.
Especially if people in offices work long days, they are sitting the whole day at the same light level, which is for their body clock too low during daytime and too high in the evening.
So if you really want to have a healthy classroom, a healthy office space, you need a much higher level of brightness, which of course increases energy consumption.
Sure.
So the win is to bring in as much natural light as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you can bring in more daylight with windows or whatever, that's the best. Yeah. And also it has to do with your lifestyle. So go outdoors as much as possible.
Right.
Start, especially when the sun is up, start having your breakfast close to a window already at home. Yeah.
Right.
Have your morning coffee or tea outdoors.
Right.
Because nothing can win from the daylight, the power of real daylight. If you can pick a desk near to a window, that's the best thing. Usually the top managers in an organization sits there, but that's the most pleasant place to be there in daylight. And if that's not possible, you have to, if you can't bring everywhere daylight in, you need to substitute that with electric light.
Right.
And of course, that might cost a little bit more energy, but it can also save a lot of pleasure in life. Well-being improves, but also it saves money because part of the costs of the health costs that as a society we have are caused by the fact that many people suffer from the circadian syndrome. That their internal clock is not running right, and that costs a lot of money. Our estimations are that it is somewhere between at least 15 to 30% of national health costs could be prevented if we would all have a much better tuned circadian system.
Oh, that's fantastic. I need to ask you about something that I don't understand. And I'm guessing a lot of people have never even heard this before. So tell us about the 3-30-300 rule.
I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay.
That's already an older rule. That is what does an organization pay? And basically the organizational costs, it could be a school or an office or a factory or whatever you have. Yeah.
Right. Okay,
Um,
I know where you're going now. Okay, all right, go ahead.
what the cost is of an organization, that's $333 per square foot.
Mhm.
And that's made up of three cost brackets, 3, 30, and 300. The total cost in a building, for example, on energy and utilities is €3 per square foot or
Okay.
$3 per square
Okay.
foot per year. Roughly, it could be 320 or whatever. Yeah. Then the second bracket is 30. $30 per square foot is the total investment cost. So the bricks, the concrete, the
Right.
glazing, the windows, all the equipment in the building, and the $30 per square foot. But if you are running an office or a factory or a school, you have people in there because that's the only reason to have a building is to house people in there.
Mhm.
People cost $300 per square foot per year.
Yeah.
And the focus, especially for the lighting part, is on the 3, because lighting is always looked at, oh, you need to save energy.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of light. No, the purpose of light is not on the 3, but it's on the 300. The people in the building should be able to perform their jobs or whatever they need to do in that building much better than they did before. And if you give them the right light, they are more energetic, they're more creative, they are more responsive, they are more sympathy, empathic, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where light comes into the play on the 300.
Fantastic. Oh, that was great. I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to speak to that. That was wonderful, Jan. We're
Yeah.
getting close to the end. So there's a question that I have to ask you. It's a question I ask every guest, and you've probably heard it. And I ask them to answer from whatever perspective they'd like. What makes a great building?
What makes a great building? That's a building where people are number one, where not the building is number one, or sometimes buildings need to be energy neutral. Of course, that is good. Yeah, if you are conscious with energy, of course, that's important. But the people are number one. A great building enables the people in the building to do the best they can on the things they need to do. In the school, the teachers educate in the best way and the students learn in the best way. In a factory, they can produce in the best way, and the total building, that's the air, the sound, the logistics in the building, but especially also the light, need to support people in performing at their best.
Amazing. Yeah, somebody should start a podcast about that. Yeah, is there before you go, is there anything that you'd like to promote? Any announcements, any exciting things that are coming up?
Keep following us. So as said, we are a non-profit organization and we have a monofocus on light. Of course, there are more important things in life than only light, but light is the biggest forgotten element of a healthy lifestyle. And so many people know about, if for a healthy lifestyle, you need to watch your diet. You shouldn't eat too much or too much fat or so on. People also know about you need movement. So exercise is important. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's important. And there is also becoming a better notion about the importance of sleep. But the underlying element under diet, under exercise, and under sleep is light. Because light makes sure that you eat at the right moment for your body, that you sleep at the right moment, and that you are alert and active at the right moment. So light is the most forgotten factor. And it is relatively new knowledge. You had Professor Foster on the show. It's relatively new. I think the evidence is only 20 years old. And as a motivation, in 2017, the Nobel Prize for Medicine has been given to 3 scientists that discovered how the influence of light and the circadian system on the biological clock, how that exactly works. So it's a relatively new knowledge, and I hope that, amongst others, with this interesting podcast, hopefully, the notion of people about the importance of light is known. And perhaps I can round it off with a very small story. Yeah?
Sure, of course.
If you ask people when they are on vacation, on holidays, yeah, after a couple of days, after a week, they feel more relaxed. They have the idea that they sleep better.
Right.
And that, of course, has to do with the fact that they are a little bit on their holidays, on their vacation time, a little bit away from their daily chores, the daily things they have to do. But when you're on vacation or on holidays, there is one element that's completely different from your normal job. You are much more outdoors than in your normal life. And your body reacts positively on that, being much more outdoors. Your clock starts running more in tune with the time of day. And that makes you sleep better, gives you a lot of rest, gives you a lot of energy. And if people are, after their vacation time, ask them 2 or 3 weeks back into their job, they said, oh, I forgot. I've lost that completely. Vacation feeling, holiday feeling was completely gone.
Right.
And I think one of the important reasons is you went from bright days back to dark days during daytime. You miss the light. And watch that. Yeah. And if you don't feel well, go outdoors, enjoy daylight, and I'm sure you feel a little bit better.
I am so glad we had this conversation. Jan, thank you very much. And for the people listening at home, it's goodlightgroup.org. Check it out. It's worth it. Jan, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. You're more than welcome, Joe. It was a pleasure.
You take care. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.